Hello and welcome to Front Row Cinema Club. When you say Charlie Chaplin, most people will think but Chaplin made a number of sound features and they felt a little bit different. Today we're going to focus on 1952's Limelight. To understand Limelight, you've got to know a little bit about Chaplin the man, so briefly. Born on the 16th of April 1889 in London, Chaplin grew up in abject poverty. His father was largely absent and his mother struggled enormously with her mental health, leading to her being institutionalised. Chaplin would be in and out of the workhouse as a child and would also take work on the stage. Popular entertainment in Victorian Britain was known as music hall, an equivalent to American vaudeville. Chaplin joined a troupe called the 8 Lancashire Lads and toured England as a clog dancer. Imagine there being a demand to see 8 young children, none of whom are probably from Lancashire, dancing in clogs on stage, but I digress. Fast forward to 1914 and Charlie signs with Keystone Pictures, develops the Little Tramp persona and becomes a big Hollywood star. The end. No. Everything went fairly well for Chaplin up until the 1940s. He manoeuvred around a few scandals, but his films were popular and he was rich and influential and generally hailed as a comedic genius. But then this guy started making waves. Meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich Now, Hitler and Chaplin were obviously very different people, though they did share a number of similarities. They had been born just 4 days apart, had risen from obscurity to achieve enormous fame, and they both had the same moustache. Hitler had banned Chaplin's films from Germany after taking power. In 1934, Chaplin was referred to as a disgusting Jewish acrobat in the Nazi publication The Jews Are Looking at You. In 1938, the Film Courier reprinted an article titled Who's Who in Hollywood, Find the Gentile, and again listed Chaplin as Jewish. This was despite the fact that he wasn't, though Chaplin often refused to deny that he was Jewish, expressing admiration and respect for Jewish people. No! And so, Chaplin, the avowed anti-fascist, began writing his first fully sound picture, a satirical script based on Hitler's Germany, which would be completed by the end of 1938. The Great Dictator went on to be a great success and is today remembered as one of the most important pieces of cinematic satire ever created. And you might think, hooray, Charlie, well done, everyone must have been on board with that vision, nobody likes Hitler. Wrong. America, at the time Chaplin began working on the project, was staunchly isolationist. And with a growing fear of communism, many took Chaplin's attack on fascism to be preemptive, somehow suspicious. What followed for Chaplin were a number of legal and personal troubles, taking a great toll on his public image. In 1946, he began production on Monsieur Verdoux, a black comedy about a man who marries and murders wealthy women. Gone is the Little Tramp. Here, Chaplin plays an entirely different sort of character, advertisements for the picture boldly proclaiming, "Chaplin changes, can you?" Monsieur Verdoux was booed and hissed at its advanced premiere. Laughs from the audience were few and far between. Chaplin was crushed. It's a good film though, it's a bit uneven, but interesting, ignore the haters. Anyway, things went from bad to worse when the FBI began to push for Chaplin's deportation from the US. He was accused of being a communist, this being the time of HUAC and Joseph McCarthy and all that. In 1952, Chaplin left New York, heading for his childhood home of London, with an eerie feeling that he would never return to America. Which brings us to our feature film. So, here's the basic story of Limelight. It's set in 1914. Chaplin plays Calvero, a washed-up music hall performer who saves his neighbour, a ballerina, called Terry, from committing suicide. They develop a relationship and support each other in their careers, and Buster Keaton shows up, and I won't spoil the ending for you. This film is all about the passing of the baton from one generation to another. Terry is on her way to stardom. Calvero is decidedly past it, a remnant of the past.
I got a bright idea. While searching through my underwear, a thought occurred to me. I'm tired of training elephants, so why not train a flea? Why should I hunt for animals and through the jungle roam?
Of course, this is partly autobiographical for Chaplin, himself a remnant of the silent days of cinema. Calvera also seems to echo his own father, Charles Chaplin Sr., who worked in the music halls himself. Charlie had very little of a relationship with his father. Charles Sr. was an alcoholic who rarely paid child support and was generally absent. Chaplin saw him perform one night, struggling to breathe on stage, very clearly in ill health. Charles Sr. died in 1901 at the age of 38 when Charlie was 12. I'll take a quote from Chaplin in the Sound Era by Erich Fromm here. Asked whether or not the new picture is autobiographical, Chaplin smiles. Everything is autobiographical, he says, with an eloquent movement of his small hands, but don't make too much of that. Limelight is clearly a deeply personal film, despite Chaplin later claiming it was based on the downfall of the comedian Frank Tinney. It's all about Chaplin's childhood and the world in which he grew up, and he uses the film as a vehicle to express his philosophy on life and love and work. It's also a family affair, Chaplin roping in several of his children to perform. The most exciting and important scene for many is the scene in which fellow silent megastar Buster Keaton appears. If you don't know, Keaton was another silent comedian who starred in films such as Sherlock Jr. and The General. He's Chaplin's American counterpart, known for his stoicism in comparison to Chaplin's pathos. In Limelight, they appear on stage together playing piano and violin. Overall, the film is more a tragedy than a comedy. It's introspective, sad and sentimental. Critical reaction was mixed, many noting the surprising abundance of dialogue compared to Chaplin's previous films. If you're new to Chaplin, I wouldn't start with this one. Go for something earlier, I'd say. City Lights is probably his most accessible work. But Limelight is worth seeing. I loved it when I was a teenager especially. I think it appeals to romantic, melodramatic little weenies in that way. Now, Limelight wasn't Chaplin's final film. It would be followed by 1957's A King in New York, not bad, and 1967's A Countess from Hong Kong, don't bother. But it certainly feels like his swan song. Whilst he was filming, he did indeed expect it to be his last, and it often seems as though Chaplin is almost addressing us, the audience, directly through his character Calvera, and sharing memories and feelings from his own life. Here's some reading and viewing recommendations for you. Limelight, obviously. It's overly sentimental and melodramatic, I'd say, but I'll allow Chaplin that. Monsieur Verdoux, his talkie before this, has moments of the same sentimentality, but with a lot more bite, so I'd check that out too. The Great Dictator, obviously. And all his silent work is superb, you pretty much can't go wrong. I always link Limelight with Laurence Olivier's The Entertainer. They're quite similar thematically, but that's got a more kitchen sink sort of feel to it. And for an overview on Chaplin as a whole, Robert Downey Jr. does a fantastic job of portraying him in 1992's Chaplin. Reading, Chaplin's autobiography is brilliant and full of fascinating stories. The X-Files episode Home is actually based on a tale from this book. This is very disturbing. Chaplin wrote that when he was on tour in the UK, he stayed at someone's house and they had a disfigured man without any legs living in their kitchen cupboard. Weird, eh? For my research, I also read the previously mentioned Chaplin in the Sound Era by Erich Fromm and Chaplin's Limelight and the Music Hall Tradition by Frank Scheid, I'm going to say, and Human Meran. Sorry if I butchered those names. Thank you so much for watching today. Like, subscribe, share, please. It really helps me out. And check out my other stuff. It's all good. What's your favourite Chaplin film? And what would you like to see a video on next? Let me know in the comments and see you again soon. Bye!